All right, in today's video, we're gonna talk about pricing, specifically how to charge 5, 10, 50, even literally 100 times more than what you're charging right now, right? But here's the thing, your pricing actually has very little to do with the hours you put into your offer, the deliverables, and it has a lot more to do with your mindset. You have to rewire your brain to charge premium prices. So I'm gonna show you how to do that in today's video. And I know this works because I literally went from charging $250 a month to charging as high as $25,000 per client. I literally tricked my brain into signing client deals for 25K, even 30K or more in some cases. So I'm gonna walk you through the entire framework in this video, and after this, you're gonna be able to charge premium prices like a boss. All right, so the first thing that you need to understand in order for you to charge premium prices is this value gap that you're experiencing in your mind. And so what do I mean by this? So what the market is willing to pay is usually a lot higher than what you think the market is willing to pay. And that's what leads to undercharging for things that are clearly of value, right? So I've walked through this transformation with so many different clients, so many different times, and it's just quite literally showing them that the market can bear a lot more money for their offer that kind of gets it to click. And it's, this internal thing in their heads, like, will clients really pay for this? Why would anyone want to pay this much money? Oftentimes you're thinking about what you would pay for an offer like that versus what your clients would pay, and there's a noticeable difference. So I've done it time and time again, right? So we could talk about Mandy when she was charging $50 for resume reviews, right? Thinking that, she couldn't charge more than that. But I just talked to her about it, and I'm like, the value that you are creating is $20,000 to $50,000 in extra salary for your clients by fixing their resume. So why would you only charge $50 for it? And so what happened was, at first she charged $1,300 for her new coaching program. And after that, she still had a little bit of trepidation. And so I told her, actually double it, right? And double it and add some change on top of it. Make it $3,000 minimum as the base price. And she did it, and clients started to close. And then after that, she actually transitioned to a group program where she was charging the same amount, but for an entire group of people instead of just one person. And so after that, she actually raised the price of the group program to where it's now commanding more money. So basically, once you get into this game, like, part of it is quite literally just raising the price and seeing that people will actually pay for it. You start to understand that really what the market is paying for is transformations. And so if you could deliver a transformation that someone thinks is worth that amount of money, like, they'll give you the money. So for example, in my case, if I'm signing 25K clients, which I've done multiple times at this point, I'm actually literally helping them drive hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra revenue. And so them giving me 25K, 30K, 40K, it's not a big deal because I'm actually providing value, right? I pay people. I have people that I pay $5,000 a month for specific services, but it's because I know that in my business, that $5,000 is going to turn to $50,000. And so when you start, this is especially when you start working with high level people, they realize the power of investing, and they realize what that investment is going to do. It's going to save them time, and they're going to see that translation between the time and the capital it's going to create, or the value it's going to create in your life. And so dealing with these types of people and selling to them is another component that's going to be really valuable for you too. But before we get into the next section, like, just understand the big part of this is you just mentally, literally not understanding that people are likely to pay a lot more money than you think. And then here's a tip that you can actually use, and it works really well if you already have existing clients. You could actually just take note of the transformation that you've actually helped them get. And so you want to answer these 3 questions if you've already worked with clients. What was their life like before working with you? What was the transformation that you helped them make? What was the after state? And then actually look at that and say, okay, like, what is the actual value of the transition you helped them make, right? So if you're thinking about it, it's like, oh, I actually helped this client make a lot of extra money or solve a really challenging and painful emotional problem that they had. And so you start to see actually where the value in your business is. And so it kind of reminds you that you can make a lot more money by actually literally physically mapping out the value that you've given, right? So that first section explains the value gap, but without understanding this next part, you're still going to run into challenges charging those higher rates. So let's talk about some of these mental psychological components that are going to be very valuable for you as well. So here's the thing, even if you logically understand that you could charge more, you're going to run into a psychological roadblock where you're going to continue to ask yourselves, like, why would anybody pay me? Why would anybody pay little old me 5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand? Like, who would possibly want to pay someone as insignificant, small, and incapable as myself, right? So when I say it like that, it sounds kind of hyperbolic and kind of like in jest, but kind of think of the way that you actually talk to yourself, right? Sometimes we're not very nice to ourselves, and we will tell ourselves stories about how we're not valuable. And interestingly enough, the way to overcome this is to kind of brainwash yourself into thinking you're more valuable. And it's to literally, in your mind, think about the fact that you are worth that amount and like recite it back to yourself. So, say to yourself, I am worth 5,000. I am worth 10,000. I'm worth 15,000, right? So like repetitively batting down your negative thoughts by replacing them with thoughts that are conducive to your results, it actually works. Because if you think about it, your mind is mostly chaotic mental chatter that you have no control under or over. So if you replace that with different thoughts, your brain and your sort of subconscious mind doesn't even like fully register whether or not you even wholeheartedly believe it, but you're just combating yourself and you're just continually putting those thoughts in your head. I'm worth it, I'm worth it, I'm worth it, I'm worth it. And another little tip that you can use, it's really, really good, really powerful tip actually. It's from this book called Psycho-Cybernetics or something like that. And it talks about this principle that you can use to rewire your self-esteem. So this guy who's a psychologist, he kind of talked about the ways that we orient ourselves with our self-image. And he actually said one of the things you can do in order to improve your self-esteem is to actually think about all your past victories, right? So actually think about, write down all the things that you've previously accomplished in your life. So if you have never worked with clients in a business before, we'll talk about all the personal and professional things, the skills that you've gained that you're going to use in your offer and how valuable they are, right? Think about how valuable they are at the company you worked for who charged 10 times the amount that they paid you. And then let's say if you're working with clients and you have worked with clients before, but you're undercharging, very common thing, go look back at your client roster, look at the results that you've been able to give them, and then remind yourself that you are worth it, right? So I have a lot of people like that where they have worked with clients, but they still have doubts about themselves. And I'm like, you don't even have to rely on your own self-image sometimes. If you've done good work for other people, you could just look at the results that you've gotten them, remind yourself of those results, and then just continue to create justifications for why you are in fact worthy of charging that money. And in tandem with actually servicing clients, getting results, raising your prices, developing case studies, raising your prices again, getting more results, like it'll eventually just wire into you that you're worth it. So this next technique is how you can actually literally justify your prices in terms of when you're working with clients. So this is kind of harness the power of something called opportunity cost, right? So opportunity costs are basically if you take one course of action, you miss out on what you could have done had you taken a different course of action. And you can actually use this when you're talking to clients. Like you want people to understand the cost of their inaction. You want them to understand that had they had the system that you are planning to install in their business or into their life, they would be further ahead than where they are right now. And so this actually generates a bit of like FOMO, right? So when you have a strategy that you're not using, like you could easily write it off because you're not thinking about it consciously. I know because I'm a business owner and I literally think of the money that I otherwise would have made had I implemented certain marketing strategies. And I've actually had people literally use that exact argument on me to get me to buy their services to help. So I know this works because I've actually used it on myself. It's been done to me. I've used it with other clients. Like it's a very good principle. So just get people to understand that there is a value associated with them not taking a certain course of action. And then you could talk about whether or not you're the right fit. But as long as you help them make that understanding, it's like, no, in fact, I should be doing this thing and I'm not, and it's costing me. Well, that's a really good bridge to selling them and to be able to justify a very high price, right? So we've given you a little bit of mindset, we've given you a little bit of tactical, but this last part is the most important part. If you get this part wrong and none of this will work and you won't be able to charge those prices. It's really a skill that you need in your life to make your life turn out the way that you would like it to, is you have to step into a new identity. You have to shed the layers of who you once were and step into a new identity. And in a way, your old self and your new self are at war with each other, right? Your old self doesn't want to die, and it has to in order for you to be successful. And so when you try to step into a new identity, your old self is going to scratch, claw, and fight you every step of the way in order to maintain its own survival. So you have to counteract that. And the way you do that is through some of the combinations of things I've said, but it's just going to be a gradual evolution. So let's take my story, for example. So at first, when I very first got got into this entire game, I started as a writer, right? So I was doing freelance writing stuff. And then as I sort of used these habits to make my life better, I started talking about self-improvement stuff, and I made a big name as a writer in that space. An identity that was only able to get me to, let's say, like 100 grand or so a year. But as time went on, so for example, I did a program that helped people write articles and make money on Medium, and that was after I had made a bunch of money on Medium. So it was a natural transition, but even then I had to move up through different levels. So when I was coaching people, for example, the very first time I coached someone with their writing, I charged $250 for the entire month. But what happened was I got some of those clients really good results. I created a program that was more scalable and helped people with the Medium stuff. It did really well. Students loved it. I've had several students say like it's their favorite online course they ever experienced or used. I've helped a lot of creators launch like really successful careers, and a lot of those people just kind of told me how much that it helped. So again, that was my way of being able to kind of justify moving to the next level. And so I just kept moving on and evolving. So I launched different programs, and eventually I started doing pretty well with business. So by the time I started, let's say, like coaching other people on this whole business stuff, I had already made 7 figures on my own. And so what's interesting is I still had some of those limiting beliefs in my mind. I remember I was talking to actually the person who I'm working with right now on some of the video strategy stuff. We had a conversation. I was actually doing a coaching call with him, showing him some Medium stuff. And he mentioned, he was like, why don't you do business coaching? And I'm like, I don't know, like, do I really deserve to be doing that? And he was like, trust me, bro, like you've actually accumulated more experience like than a lot of people who jump into it. And I'm like, that's a fair point. So like I had to step into that new identity. So after years of working with writers, helping them build their audiences, doing the personal growth coaching, writing books, I just realized like I've accumulated a fair amount of experience. So finally, about a year or so, I stepped into that new identity. It's like, okay, I've done a lot of things, and maybe I'm not the richest, most successful person in the world, but I at least know enough to help type of clients on the level that I'm helping them with. And so I stepped into that identity. And then I had to match that financial number with that as well. And so I had to shift to another identity of, I used to be a very much, I want to help everyone. I want to be amenable and open to all of my customers. But this sort of high ticket model that I'm espousing, it requires you to cut off 90% of your audience because they're not going to be able to afford it. And so I had to make that transition, which now I help my clients transition to that point of, you're gonna have to step into that sort of luxury provider where you're stepping into a role of someone who is working exclusively, who doesn't work with anybody, who does have boundaries, who does have the self-respect to command those rates. And so all of these things happen over time for me. And what I try to do with people, and what's been amazing, is I can help people skip a lot of those steps. So for example, one of my clients, we got her to $40,000 a month in less than a year. And it's because I just told her to step into that new identity immediately, and I kind of like nudged her very encouragingly into doing it. We priced her at premium right away so we could skip through a lot of those things. I'm really glad that I'm able to help my clients do that. But long story short, making that transition from new identity to new identity, accumulating social proof, accumulating evidence, it's something that takes time, but you do have to understand that at a certain point you have to let go of your old self in order to become the new person who can justify those prices. So that is how I tricked my brain into charging 25 grand per client, and it's how you can trick your brain into charging high ticket prices for what you have to sell. But here's the thing, me telling you on a video to raise your prices is a lot different from you doing it in the real world. And one of the things I help my clients with very often is not just logistically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually calibrating themselves in such a way that allows them to make a lot of money faster than they otherwise would have on their own. So if you would like me to facilitate something similar for you, you can go to the link in the description and you can book a call with me. We're going to talk about your business. I'm going to talk about what I would do specifically in your situation to 10x your prices right away so that you can install a high ticket offer into your business. And then if it makes sense for both of us, I will invite you to work with me to implement that plan. So go to the link in the description, book a call, and if it seems like a good fit, we'll talk soon and potentially even work together.